Tony Khan is given a lot of credit for what he's doing with the blacks over in AEW now, which means that Big Swole won in the end the racial haranguing, the race bullying that has been going on in AEW for the last 5 years is finally starting to bear fruit. So the race bullying actually began before Big Swole made it a big deal, as some fans complained in like 2019 or 2020 about the lack of black wrestlers and the lack of opportunities for black wrestlers, which led to Cody Rhodes wrestling Mark Quinn on a random episode of Dynamite. But it became to a head in late 2021, December of 2021, when Big Swole, of all people, decided she was going to give her exit interview and complain about the lack of representation in AEW. She says there is no representation. It doesn't, and when there is, it doesn't come across as genuine. I don't know why everyone is afraid to accept it or say it. What happens is you have a company that treats people like family, but there's nobody that looks like me that is represented at the top in the room with them. They are not helping to necessarily influence decisions, but to explain why certain slang, certain words shouldn't be said. So they basically need racial editors. You need to have a race editor, brother. That's how you represent black people, is by telling other people what they can and can't say. Then she says, there is no one else who can explain our culture and experience except for us. I'm gonna overlook that. So then, of course, Tony Khan goes and he hires Will Washington, which I believe was in 2023. So 2 years after this. And we get our first black world champion in 2024. Yeah, so in May in 2023, Will Washington becomes the first black world champion. He becomes the first black executive. Well, more like the second, because I believe that there was already a guy in there, Captain Sean Dean, who was one of the executives of AEW. I think he just worked with like the undercard guys, though. He might have been like one of the guys that was booking like the undercard talent. But Will Washington became on the creative team. From there, you started getting Swerve. Now you got MVP and Lashley and Ricochet, all those guys coming in pretty much at around the same time. So there's a black infusion into AEW. And this led to some of the bliggities all of a sudden giving Tony Khan credit for what he's doing with black talent. So let's get into this clip as Tony Khan graciously takes his award for saving the Negroes. Sorry it took so long.
I want to commend you, Tony, for what you do with black wrestlers on your show, because you guys definitely push them forward, and even more so now. I see it. You definitely putting Swerve over for sure with the title, but bring in the Hurt Syndicate, as you mentioned, Ricochet, Leo Rush there as well.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that. Is that a conscious decision on you guys' part? And because I know you're not just pushing them because of their color, they have to have the talent too to do it. But tell me about that decision to be conscious about what.
Well, I think you just said it, Big Dave. I'm conscious of it, but I also think that these are all some of the best wrestlers in AEW you just named. So we're really lucky to have those great stars, and we've been fortunate to be able to build up some stars and also have a lot of great free agents come in, to where I think so many of the top wrestlers, some of the top black wrestlers in the world are in AEW. And I really think most of the top black wrestlers in the world are now in AEW. But I think that is a conscious thing. But I also think it's great. And it's awesome to hear that. I'm glad that that's something that's connected with you, and it means a lot. Thank you for saying that.
Oh, no doubt about it, man. We focus.
So, look, his response was better than the one Triple H gave. I'll say this. I'm not for race bullying or race haranguing or representation or any of that other garbage. I really don't care about any of that stuff. To be quite honest, though, what Tony Khan has done has been somewhat a reverse on course. Remember, Leo Rush was the guy who stood out when Big Swole made her original comment, and then Tony Khan said he let her contract lapse because she wasn't good enough. Leo Rush was the guy who stood up and said, wait a second, you can't say stuff like that. That's terrible. And then he got pretty much bullied out of the company and then blacklisted for like a year or so. And then he learned his lesson, and all of the race haranguing kind of started to work, as I guess you could say some of the other people started to let Tony down. he started going with, okay, let's give these people a chance. And now you've got, these race guys in Tony's ear. And look, if it gets Powerhouse Hobbs where he should be, it's unfortunate that it took this to happen. And that's, for me, the problem with the entire conversation of representation, is if it takes for somebody to basically say, as a collective, you should do more with these people, and then it gets actually talented people pushed, that's unfortunate. That's actually a bad thing. That means you couldn't see talent before, but now that it's politically convenient, you're all about it. I don't like that. I don't like when you try to use black people for your political convenience. I like that less than the representation argument. Don't tell me about black people's experiences and all this. No, black people, there is no black experience. There's individuals in areas who have similar to the same experiences, but there is no universal black experience. I can tell you that much right now, and I can say that with 100% certainty. But what is definitely unfair is if you had a guy like Powerhouse Hobbs on your roster, and another person like Athena, who has been on his roster for like the last 2 years, who you have saw nothing in until all of a sudden the race guys started getting in your ear. Now, I love this guy. He's really good. It's like, oh, okay, he was on your roster this entire time. What were you doing 2 years ago when Powerhouse Hobbs was on your roster? He wasn't good then. You paid him no attention then. Now, Ricochet, I can genuinely say probably would have been in AEW from the start if he had not gone to NXT first. I don't think AEW was even an option because it didn't exist. But, people like Lashley and MVP, these guys are talented dudes. I'm a big fan of all of them. Shelton Benjamin as well. Can't complain about them. Can't complain about Swerve at all. Again, I like all of these guys. I'm more or less looking at some of the other people who didn't get chances before Tony Khan decided to wake up and decide that, the blacks, they're so talented. A guy like Ricky Starks, who other people kept telling him, that guy's really good. CM Punk and Bryan Danielson and all these guys trying to put over Ricky Starks and trying to get Ricky Starks should have been getting pushed. But you kept start pushing Ricky Starks, and he got frustrated and basically gave up on you. But now you got to import and play the black tax, which is you have to pay these black people more to do the same thing. If you just booked the black people that you had better, you probably would be paying people who will be more loyal to you and who you gave a chance to, rather than people who, they got frustrated with Triple H, and so now they came over. So now you got to pay the black tax, which is you got to pay a little bit more for something that is pretty much the same as what you had before. I don't really see. Look, I'm going to give him credit for having a better answer than Triple H, but I understand what this is. And what this is whenever people get into that racial haranguing, it never turns out well. But at the very least, Tony Khan has decided that Private Party all of a sudden are good now. Out of nowhere, Private Party are all of a sudden great. You kind of tell me that this isn't some kind of political motivation, that this is all about, they're great talents. Private Party's been on your roster for 4 years or more, and they weren't any good. Now all of a sudden they're good. Okay. I mean, if that offends me, and it would offend me if I was a member of Private Party. I would say, hell, I was here this entire time. You were doing nothing with us. You didn't think we had the talent. You didn't care about us. Now all of a sudden you do, because there's some bliggities in your ear telling you got to push more black talent. You got to represent the black experience. Get the fuck out of here. Now, I'm sure you would take the extra money and the extra platform as being a tag team champion or whatever it is he decides to do now, and maybe you a little bit more forgiving. You could say, well, you know what? Does it really matter at this point? I got what I wanted. So does it really matter how I got there? And in some instances, the answer is going to be no. I mean, you got what you came for. You wanted to be a champion. You wanted the platform. You got it. So does it matter that it only happened because of, political arm twisting by podcasters and, con whisperers in the office? Probably not. And a lot of black people who are, unfortunately insecure, and insecurity comes from competition. When you have a lot of these black people who consistently are comparing themselves to whites or Hispanics or other people and always finding that they're coming up short, they get insecure. And so you'll have this perpetual argument that there's not a lot of representation in pro wrestling. There's racial discrimination in pro wrestling. This argument didn't stop when Big Cat Ernie Ladd was making the same money as all the other main eventers in Madison Square Garden. It didn't end when Junkyard Dog was leading an entire territory from Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, all the southern states, by the way. It didn't end when Kamala was one of the top draws in the company. It didn't end when the Junkyard Dog got a huge deal with the WWF, which included action figures and being featured in the cartoon and all that stuff. It didn't end when Ron Simmons became the first black world champion of a major wrestling promotion in WCW. It didn't end when The Rock became the world champion in WWE. It didn't end when Booker T became the world champion. It didn't end when Ron Simmons became the first black NWA world champion. It didn't end when Kofi Kingston won the world title in the co-main event, co-featured spot, because it wasn't technically the main event of WrestleMania. This conversation just never actually ends. And it didn't end when Swerve won the world title. It didn't end when blacks are hired in writing positions in WWE. It didn't end when blacks are hired in writing positions in TNA or in AEW. It just does not end. This is a conversation that simply does not end ever. This is a illness for which there is no cure. So I'm sorry. I don't get jazzed about this kind of stuff. I don't care about it, because a lot of the bliggities are going to be upset anyway. And there's nothing you can do about it. The best you can do is see actually talented people, regardless of race, and then push them. But when you decide that, we're going to push black people now, I'm less enthused, because I see it as more political, the outcome of political haranguing, than actual UC talent. And because you're not all of a sudden seeing all the black talent at one time and saying, oh, I think these guys are great. All at one time? All at one time, huh? Okay. Sure. Like, share, subscribe. Talk to you guys later.
No one does it better.